fine art logistics and hospitality, meaning hotels, hostels, and guest houses and so on. So we employ a lot of people across different continents, and I myself was educated both in Hong Kong, in America, Canada, and most recently I'm doing my PhD at Fudan University in Shanghai.
Great, thank you, Anson. And Ms. Kwan?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My full name is Nhan Hong Kwan. I'm a CEO of a listed company with 100% owned by Singapore New Toyo Group. This is my pleasure to be here to have some sharing with all of us here. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. My name is Mike Bill. I'm representing Center for China and Globalization. CCG, in short, is a non-governmental think tank in Beijing, and we specialize in public policy, track through diplomacy, global trade, globalization, and development. My own background, I was very much, in technology, 35 years in the US, Singapore, Southeast Asia. I still remember the way I come yesterday. I remember lots of things resonate, the good memory where I was running around in this part of our country. Very happy to be here.
Great, thank you, Mike. And Ms. Pang?
Hello, my name is Tom. Good afternoon. Actually, I'm coming from China University's investment platform. At the same time, I'm in charge of a non-profit organization in Zhongguancun to promote, to build the local innovation ecosystem. Actually, my background, my over 30 years career is more about globalization. I'm doing the innovation with Tsinghua University in China, and also Cambridge University in the UK, and also with the Microsoft in the London staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hello, everybody. My name is Fu Huang. I'm coming from the Sinopharm. Sinopharm, the full name is the China National Pharmaceutical Group, which is the largest pharmaceutical and health company in China. And we have a very long production line from the research development and chemical, biological, traditional medicine, manufacture, logistical, and the hospital management. And the farm turnover last year is over $100 million US dollars. So we ranked number 80th global 500 2023 according to the turnover, which is the largest pharmaceutical group in the world. I'm very happy to be here and discuss about the cooperation between China and Vietnam in the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. Sinopharm has established the branches in Horny in 1990s, and in 1993, and we made an investment. We called the first Chinese company invested in the pharmaceutical industry in Vietnam. It's called the Vietnam China Pharmaceutical Company Corporation, and we have been here for more than 30 years already. We are very happy to discuss about the future operations in the healthcare sectors. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everybody. As you can see, we have a very broad set of experiences here on stage, everything from large corporates to think tanks that all you do is think about what's going on in the world and can share with us your potential solutions. So let's start with Mike. Mike, we, in our pre-conversation, we talked about the concept of how silence is bad, right? And we all know this. We all know that communication is very important. And I think at the government level, that's very clear. There are 36 agreements between China and Vietnam. So that conversation is happening, and that's great. The thing that we have to think about, though, is when you have a policy, let's say in your corporation, you have a policy, in order for the employees to adopt and use that policy, there has to be more communication. Right, so I'd like to move over to Mike here. What are some ways that China and Vietnam can foster a deeper mutual understanding between the two countries?
Thank you. I look at this as a great question. If I recall, the head of Vietnamese National Assembly just visited Beijing last week, and I look at the China-Vietnamese, the Vietnam relationship definitely, have been strengthened. I look at the moderator was saying how we are able to cascade the relationship and the trust from our top leaders between two nations to the working level. That takes lots of work. I look at the few things I would definitely see the huge value is for the business sectors and how they can facilitate the exchange in the industry and the students. I was meeting with some young Vietnamese students. I was really inspired by their knowledge, their ability to adapt new technologies, so on and so forth. I would say if we can promote more free exchange students and even the tourists with a much more relaxed visa between two nations, that definitely can help to convey the messaging of how to strengthen the relationship.
Students, I think that's really key, right? You start communication at a young age so that people can really understand each other, not just from a policy perspective, but from a human perspective. You have to kind of like the other person before you want to work with them. What about adults, right? What about business people? How can we increase those communications?
I look at business people, I look at, if I recall, one of the stories, I look at like a TCL, the white goods manufacturer, they make the TV and the large the format, flat TV panels. I look at all these things, what they can do is they are already invest their business here, they are creating like 10,000 jobs here, right? So I look at what the things for Vietnam business people is really cope with the Chinese people, try to take some know-how in the manufacturing area, in the supply chain area, how to promote the trading with the other part of the world, leveraging the manufacturing capacity in China and in Vietnam. Second, if you look at one of the things also always very fascinating, if you look at every day the e-commerce development in China, I look at cross-border transactions between Vietnam and China that definitely need to be strengthened. I look at how we are able to compare the supply chain and also even I would say the procurement and the transaction, the custom clearance, all these things, if we can get it done electronically, that will help to promote the commerce between two countries.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing is we need to open up access, right? So if it's student programs where you provide exchange programs, that's providing access in terms of understanding each other's cultures. And then Mike also mentioned sharing knowledge and promoting trade, e-commerce information. So that's enabling access at the business level. Let's talk let's go a little bit deeper to the China's Belt and Road Initiative and then Vietnam's Two Quarters and One Ring Initiative. And those are official initiatives that are looking to improve ties between the two countries. How do you see that happening?
I look at one of the things is if I really compare 2023 was before pandemic, I look at the chemistry, the interaction have been significantly improved. I look at if we can, from both government, it's like even for this HORASIS China conference held here in Vietnam, it will help increase exposure from both sides in Vietnam. I would say just a bit more similar events to get all the business stakeholders aligned to focus on the growth opportunity.
So how can these two initiatives specifically help with increasing these initiatives?
I look at all these initiatives basically is to help people from both sides to understand the potential in each country. Number two is how to leverage the talents. Right? If you look at the talents in China, technology, R&D, supply chain, all those technology and know-how, how to cope with the so-called labor-intensive manufacturing work. Right? Because China is no longer, as a country to compete on the cost, but are more on the leading front of technology transformation. If we can combine the strength from both sides, definitely I would say will provide a much more competitive offerings.
Thank you. That's very interesting because overall Mike stressed two key things: access and communication. Right? We all know those are kind of the two key foundational pieces that you need for any type of relationship, whether that's person to person or country to country. So let's dive a little bit deeper because Mike ended with China is strong at manufacturing, and we've seen that. Right? China has grown through the ranks from low value add manufacturing to very high value add manufacturing. And we have on stage an expert at manufacturing, Mr. Fu. Mike talked about giving people more access to each other. We talked about the Belt and Road and the 2 corridors and 1 green initiatives, and giving businesses more infrastructure to encourage trade. So I'd like to talk to you, Mr. Fu, about what you've witnessed as substantial growth in the pharmaceutical exchange between Vietnam and China. How has improved infrastructure facilitated better cooperation between the two countries?
Actually, China and Vietnam have a long history of interaction due to their adjacent landscapes and the connected land borders, and the exchange in the field of the pharmaceutical and health care. I think 2022, the report stated that Vietnam's pharmaceutical industry have an annual output value of the 2.2 or 6.2 or 6.4 in US dollars, and the pharmaceutical industry annual output value reached 7 billion US dollars, which compound growth rate to over 10%. The value of the pharmaceuticals new markets imported from China was 380 million US dollars from the Guangxi port, and this is covered 5,000 types of the medicine. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic has led to an increased demand of health and disease prevention among the Vietnamese peoples. And the vaccine and the biological product market in Vietnam is still on the early stage. Many of the product is reliant on the import. Therefore, there's a big potential to produce the biological product locally and then replace the import product with the cost-effective local alternative. China and Vietnam can utilize their respective advantage and resources in the pharmaceutical field to promote the cooperation in the research and development, manufacture productions, and supply chain logistics. China has a very strong pharmaceutical industry, and we have more than 10,000 pharmaceutical factories, and we have China has the development capacity in the field of chemical drugs, biological drugs, and traditional medicines. And whilst Vietnam has the unique advantage, the manpower resources and the locations and the big market. The two countries can share the resource and the technology, improve the efficiency and the capacity of industrial chain, and achieve the multi-beneficial and unique. I think from my point, I think we can have the cooperation model like the Chinese industrial facilities and raw materials, plus Vietnam production and market with the drugs registration for the finished product and the sales market. This will improve the whole neighbor countries and for these regions in the pharmaceutical industrial promotion. And also, I believe we can expansion the market to the region countries like Laos and Cambodia.
Okay, that's very interesting. So essentially, as we know, China is a powerhouse in manufacturing. And so within the pharmaceutical space, China has over 10,000 manufacturing factories. And part of that knowledge can definitely be shared with the industries here in Vietnam. So can we talk a little bit about knowledge sharing? And we talked about, Mr. Fu initially talked about the infrastructure and how that's being built out. Let's talk about the knowledge. Right? How can the two countries share knowledge within the pharmaceutical space to help grow the sectors in both countries?
Okay, actually, Sinopharm have some working experience in the cooperation with Vietnam and the Asian countries in the pharmaceutical field. Because Sinopharm is the largest pharmaceutical company in China, and we have the capacity and a wide range of the production to meet the market of the different countries and regions. And secondly, Sinopharm have the experience and the resources in the international development. As we have the factories in Malaysia, Vietnam, in UAE, and in Latin Americas. And we have the deeply cooperation with the international partners. And we would like to have the next stage in the Vietnam, bring more and more Chinese traditional medicine brand and to Vietnam because we have very comprehensive production system. And Sinopharm, we have more than 3,000 pharmaceutical brands in China. We would like to bring our technologies and the financings and the manpower to Vietnam to cooperate with the local companies to register more drugs and have the future development.
That's very interesting. So essentially China has, or Sinopharm has experience not only in doing Western pharmaceuticals, but also traditional Chinese medicine. And the company has started expanding manufacturing, not just in China, but also to Indonesia, UAE, and also to Vietnam. And in those relationships, China or Sinopharm acts as the knowledge holder and sharing that knowledge with the recipient countries. And those countries in turn manufacture and then sell domestically, which then grows the market for both countries. So that's a very kind of harmonious way to cooperate between the countries. So quick summary. So Mike started by talking about how communication and access are key to developing any type of relationship within Asia or in general. And then Fu dug a little bit deeper to see, okay, well, there's the Belt and Road Initiative. How is that helping manufacturing and businesses between the two countries? He gave us a great example of how Sinopharm is doing it. So let's move the conversation over to Hansen. So in our prior conversation, we talked about how the knowledge sharing is really important, right? We both agree sharing knowledge between the two countries is key. Are you noticing something that is happening in China that's important to share so that we can all learn together? I think you talked about the middle income trap, and why do you think China is heading into this trap?
Let's see if members of the audience have heard of this concept, the middle income trap. Does anybody know anything about it? MIT, middle income trap. Only very few of you know. Congratulations if you know. There's a little prize for you at the end of this presentation. Normally when we think about MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where my uncle graduated from as an aerospace engineer. But in economics, MIT is something much more serious. It's the problem of how emerging economies can grow very fast for a period of time and then enter into some sort of stagnation. It's not economic collapse. It's not a recession. It's just stagnation, meaning a period of prolonged slow growth where per capita income no longer increases and the emerging economy fails to catch up with the club of rich countries in the world. Some good examples of Southeast Asia would be countries like Malaysia. Malaysia was approaching breakthrough to a rich country in about the year 1996. And after the Asian financial crisis of 1997, for the past 25 years it's stagnated. But that's not the only country. Thailand, our neighbor here from here, is also stuck in this middle income trap. There are a number of countries that have done even more poorly, like Argentina was 100 years ago tipped to become a rich country. And now it is a country that every decade or so gets into a foreign debt crisis. There are many reasons why emerging economies grow very fast for a time and then slow down. Some of the more common causes postulated by economists and political theorists say that it's something about the gap between rich and poor in a country, or the failure of the government to invest in public infrastructure, or perhaps a failure of government to provide adequate education and training for the workforce, or perhaps a lot of official corruption. That could be another problem. The list goes on and on. But what's interesting about the case of China is that ever since President Xi Jinping came to power about 11 years ago now, that China has actually done what most economists would say, the right measures to try to solve these problems and counter these factors that could cause an economy to slow down. For instance, President Xi Jinping launched an official anti-corruption drive, and is continuing that drive to catch corrupt officials high and low. China is also spending a lot of money on technical education, and there's a lot of public subsidy for research and development. China has first-class public infrastructure in terms of airport, high-speed rail, freeways and highways, subway systems, you name it. Most of the Chinese public infrastructure projects in the past 25, 30 years is world-class. So that cannot be a problem. And yet, despite all these measures, China is noticeably slowing down. Some people thought maybe just the COVID pandemic, but China's now opened up since the end of the pandemic for more than a year now, about a year and a half. The slowdown continues. IMF has a branch in Beijing that recently reforecast the prospective growth rate of the Chinese economy and cut future growth rates by more than 1% per annum. And so now China is forecast to have growth rates that slow down to about 3.5%, 3% per annum by the end of this decade. That would be not much better than many North American and European rich countries. And at that rate, China will never catch up to America. So the question is why? So this is important because a country like Vietnam can learn from China. There are many similarities that the Vietnamese people and government share with that of China. Vietnam is a country that is governed by one single party. It's a socialist party, and there is no competitive politics, or very little. Secondly, both countries have a hybrid economy of both state-owned enterprises and private sector. And how is capital allocated between these sectors is a very good question and a big challenge. So if we could learn from the Chinese example, perhaps other emerging economies can take some lessons and see if problems can be resolved to ensure continued progress. Also, China itself is a big engine for global economic growth because China buys, not just sell a lot and export a lot, China often buys a lot from other countries too. So as long as China grows fast, it's an engine to pull other emerging economies up by the bootstraps. So the question is why? And I can give you a few observations of mine that I think could be of interest to all of us. Some of it peculiar to China, but some of it applicable to many other countries. For instance, what we have right now is a process of globalization that is stalling. And why is that happening? Mostly because there is a strategic rivalry that's intensifying between America and China. Obviously, this is geopolitics, but economics is every bit as affected by geopolitics as economic policy. America now sees China as a serious rival, as a power, as a superpower that may build new international institutions that would rival the sort of liberal democratic institutions that America has built at the end of the Second World War. Things like the IMF, the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, IMF, and so on. These are all institutions that were built at the end of the Second World War under American leadership. But of course, President Xi Jinping of China is trying to build an alternative set of international developmental organizations, such as the Belt and Road Initiative, such as the Shanghai Dialogue Group, and such as the BRICS Bank, which comprises Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as China's also doing its own infrastructure and development finance, independent of the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. So America sees that as being a challenge to the institutions that have been founded 70 years ago at the end of the Second World War. Also, President Xi Jinping pursues a much more assertive foreign policy in terms of projecting Chinese economic power and influence on neighboring countries and countries with which China trades a lot with. So these are things that have led to America's concerns. America now tries to do what is called selective decoupling, where certain key industries and supply chains they want to take away from China, and also sanctions on certain Chinese entities and restrict access of China to cutting-edge research, especially in things like chip design and chip making and so on. So this is one factor that's unique to the Chinese situation. But there are other factors, such as the over-reliance on public infrastructure investment as an engine to push economic growth. Chinese public infrastructure is already world's first class, and if there's much more money being poured into it, what happens is you get what is called a declining return on investment. And a good example is Malaysia. My Malaysian friends always joke. How many of you are from Malaysia? Raise your hands. Anyone at all? No? My Malaysian friends always joke about how Malaysia has first-class infrastructure and third-class mentality in terms of management. So that's the difference between hardware and software.
Yes, I'm sorry, we have to cut in a little bit just in the interest of time. This is super fascinating. This is definitely a topic that I thought a lot about, and how does Vietnam avoid this trap, especially as we look at our neighbors. So you mentioned Thailand, potentially Philippines also. How do you see us trying to prevent this from happening? You talked a lot about the why, and the why is important. Any thoughts on how we can stop this from going down this path?
I think first of all, it takes two to tango. So, if America wants to view China as a rival, then it makes it difficult for China to try to improve that relationship. I think China is trying, but I think there are some things that China can do to sort of reduce regional tensions. China has a lot of border disputes and border claims against Japan, for instance, India, in the South China Sea, and so on. And I always use the European North Sea example as a way for countries that share a common sea to talk not about borders, because nobody can live on the sea unless you're fishermen, and there are not many of them anymore. But how to share underwater natural resources, like underwater mineral, oil, and gas resources, and how to share fishing rights. And I think European countries have set a very good example on with the North Sea Accords that were slowly built up in the 1950s. And I think China needs to face up to that. Now, having a large PLA Navy does not mean that you can, enforce territorial claims that are not recognized by your neighbors. That just causes smaller Southeast Asian countries to get into a stronger alliance with America, which is to China's detriment. Secondly, China needs to build up its sort of social welfare system. My Chinese friends always say that China's taxation rates are no lower than in the rich countries, but yet in terms of free services, public services, social welfare, China ranks a lot lower. So you see a lot of illegal migrants go to America, go to Europe, but they never walk across the border to China because there are no freebies in China. So what happens there is it's true that you get a bunch of very hardworking citizens, but then they also then do not consume too much. Chinese consumption as a percentage of GDP is only about 37%, versus rich countries, well over 50% of GDP is pushed by private consumption. And also private consumption helps to develop the services industry. So as China transitions from just an industrialized country to a more sophisticated, developed economy, it's not just about moving up the value chain to high tech, to chip making, to making commercial aircraft and aerospace. It's also about encouraging fine arts, encouraging professional services and personal services. And so that can only happen if Chinese consumers have confidence to spend more money and save less. And that in turn requires the state to spend more money on social security, social welfare, free education, free medical care, and some public pension plan and so on. Also, China needs to address a very big problem, which is the demographics of the population. China is notorious in having a very big imbalance in terms of parental responsibility.
I think that we can, let's stop there. Thank you, Anson. So essentially, the message here is China could potentially be heading toward the middle income trap, something that Vietnam could also, considering the similarities between the two economies. And Anson talked about potential reasons how we can avoid this, and looking from the top down, looking at policies and relationships with other countries, policies with the citizens within the country. Now, I would like to enter a posit which is coming from the bottom up. So I spent the past 15 years in venture capital, and one of the themes that is generally always talked about in venture capital is technology, and how can technology and innovation grow an economy and continue to push forward the people in that country. And we have a panelist on our panel today that's an expert in that, Ms. Peng. And Peng and I talked about how China is very aware that technology and innovation is very important. So I'd like to break up the conversation with Ms. Peng into two different areas. One is within China, and then after that we'll talk about how China is helping technology outside of China. Let's start with within China. Can you talk to us a little bit about what China is doing to help grow the technology and innovation within China?
Okay, look at this question. I like to use example of Zhuguantun. Zhuguantun is a Chinese version of Silicon Valley. So for Zhuguantun, I give a very brief feeling of some numbers about Zhuguantun. Zhuguantun is about nearly 500 square kilometers, and there are over 16,000 national certified high-tech companies. And the companies with the revenue over 100 million is about, there are about more than 4,000 companies with revenue over 100 million Chinese. So that's a few numbers about Zhuguantun for the sectors. Zhuguantun cover the information technologies, including semiconductor, the healthcare, we say smart manufacturing, and in the morning session, I think we have a session with Xinjiang, and also government mentioned similar things. So I think we have shared some similar kind of industry insights. So Zhuguantun is a kind of Chinese version of innovation. And in the last 40 years, they always promote we say support innovation. So in summary, Zhuguantun last year they just launched initiatives called to build world-class science park. So it's a kind of way say 1+5 plan. The one is that I mentioned is a total kind of total initiatives. They follow that. They launch 5 actions, actually the policies make things really, really happen. They kind of locate over 1 billion RMB on all these policies. Let me say one by one about these 5 policies. The first one is trying to improve innovation capabilities. It's more about to provide capital to support R&D things in the company. The second one is about to promote technology finance. Actually, is trying to promote the finance support to the high-tech company, the startups, including startups and big companies as well. That's the second one. The third one is more focused on the science park. We say it's about kind of a platform, including incubators, including university science parks. That's where the technology comes from, where the technology was born there. The fourth is very much about the trying to support, we say, calling the ecosystem. The ecosystem kind of cover everything, but the ones we now is more focused on, for example, IP, intellectual properties. It's not just provide capital, but also kind of a launch, we say, kind of a fast track for the technology company, we can apply the patents more quickly and more easily. And the fifth is just very much about differently about the globalization phase in terms of trying to support on the, we say, inbound, outbound. Inbound, trying to invite maybe Western, not Western, but global, the R&D, the operating office, and also entrepreneurs to have a presence in Zhongguancun. And the other side is outbound. Same things, try to help or promote the Chinese companies set up R&D or set up offices globally. Always help them to apply, even apply the patents. So you said that's the 5%.
I think that's very interesting. I think a lot of countries are adopting something similar. And I think a lot of people think that this could be similar to the Silicon Valley approach, right? So you start with the big corporates, those teach the technology industry, the people who are high performing there, they quit the large corporates, they start their own startups, they graduate from universities, they go to incubators, and so you build a whole ecosystem. Can you talk a little bit about how China is bringing that outside China?
Okay, let's use my work when I share my expertise. I would say from two levels. One is about we say our global incubator networks. We originally set up our first incubator in Tsinghua. So later now it's incubator global, very much along with our alumni. So we have incubator in the UK, we have incubator in other European countries, also have incubator or kind of say innovation camp in Indonesia, and also we have a presence in Malaysia as well. But that's about kind of we say incubator. On the other side we have the venture funds. We have venture funds in Silicon. It's a kind of our first fund outside China. Also we have venture funds in Europe as well. To some, the support from the government, I could summarize from a few levels. First is about the capital to the funds. So we definitely got capital from outside China and also from China as well. Sometimes we have a 50-50 things. So to connect that, so the should be the fund size. And also got the support on the operation level. The operation level means, for example, we got support on the R&D, if we do R&D outside China, and then we can get from the Ministry of Chinese Science and Technology. And also at that time, a few years ago, not a few years, maybe 10 years ago, we got a similar support from UK government as well. So it's a couple of methods. And the other different way is about we provide kind of a physical space that will happening. But for Malay things, it could be interesting because Malay have a very close sort of a friendship with Guangxi province. So at the time, we set up a kind of a China-Malay science park in Guangxi. Along with that, we set up an equity fund in that to invest into the companies in both countries. We invest into the company in Malay companies who have a kind of business opportunity in China and vice versa as well. So we started our Southeast Asia presence a few years ago in Malay, in Singapore, in Indonesia, and definitely we are willing to see more in Vietnam as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Han. So let me quickly summarize before we move on to our last speaker. So we started with Mike, who talked about the importance of access and communication. And then we moved from there to talk about the Belt and Road and the Two Quarters of One Belt initiatives. And who explained to us how the Cedar Farm example, how they are doing that, using these initiatives to continue to grow the manufacturing within Southeast Asia. And then Anson talked a little bit about some of the upcoming potential problems, namely the middle income trap, and how can we continue to share knowledge between the countries so that we can avoid these traps together. And then Ms. Peng talked about the innovation and the technology support that China is providing within China and also outside of China. So as you can see, our first four speakers are very knowledgeable about the Chinese market. So let's move on to our last speaker, Ms. Kwan, who definitely, last but not least, we're going to go a little bit more detailed. But as promised earlier, we talked broad about policies and programs, and then now let's get more specific. I know that we're all here in Vietnam, and many of you are running companies here or are considering entering the market. And so I talked to Ms. Kwan about providing some really kind of concrete advice on how to operate in Vietnam. And so we will talk in three different categories with Ms. Kwan. We will talk first about regulatory issues, then we'll talk about employees, so as we all know, employee issues are one of the top problems that all management faces. And then the last one will be the consumer. Right? If you're operating here, how do you sell effectively to the customer in Vietnam? So let's head over to Ms. Kwan. Can you talk a little bit about some of the regulations that a business needs to be aware of when they are operating in Vietnam? A foreign business.
Hello. I think the corporate tax in Vietnam is quite good. Now it's 20%. Actually, it is lower than the corporate tax of China by 5%. And compared with other neighbor countries like Philippines, Mongolia, or Bangladesh, actually our corporate tax is very attractive to foreign investment. So I think in the future, there may have a lot of the foreigner will interest to across to Vietnam to find their jobs. But before I answer your question, may I have I want to ask, have there any officer of the Department of Labor sitting here? I want to tell a true
before we
story.
talk about them.
I want to tell a true story. Actually, the foreigner here, when we want to come to Vietnam, the first thing they have to get the entry visa. And if they want to stay here to find a job, they have to follow with the work permit. But work permit, everything we have to come back with the Department of Labor. What I want to say is the formalities for the application is very, very complicated. Very complicated. I would like to raise a case of my niece. After graduating the university from Taiwan, and he came to join our new Toyo group. And actually, he has to spend 2 tickets to return to the country to complete all the personal certification. I think the regulation here is quite strictly. It seems more welcome to the expert investor or some very special skill worker. For those graduate students, it seems not much welcome to find a job here. So I think, and the other thing is all the applications must go through the Department of Labor. Since we have so many industrial in Vietnam and especially in Ho Chi Minh City, should government consider to empowering to the industrial zone to let them to handle the case of the foreigner application, whatever the visa apply the visa, working permit, or extend the permit. That should be it's good for the foreigners. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a very kind of tricky, funny, but yet also frustrating topic. There are a lot of things that Ms. Kwan talked about that I think as you enter the Vietnam market, you'll kind of face and realize that it's not so funny anymore now that you're stuck. For example, when I first came to Vietnam, I had to provide my diploma. I also got my MBA from abroad, and they needed to make sure that your degree is the same as what you're working in. But nowadays, most of the time, most people aren't doing what they studied, right? So it's little loophole, not loopholes, but little fine print items like this that make it actually very difficult for you to operate and bring in your senior management team. So definitely something that all business owners should consider and be very aware of, that it will take much longer than you actually think to get up and running. So now that, let's say, now you're kind of progressing through and you're set up and you're running, now you have people, now you have employees, which then run into employee problems. Ms. Kwan, can you talk a little bit about that?
I think I have more than 30 years as the CEO of the New Toyo Aluminum Packaging Company here. We have to care about the people. We have to build a good environment for them to be safe, to cooperate with us in the long term. The employee here is how will I say, trọng tình cảm in Vietnamese.
They respect the emotion and the bonds between employee and employer.
Yeah. So I would like to really explain when the COVID pandemic here, all the enterprise, the manufacturer must call 3 on site. So I recall that the number of check-in for my employee is more than 90%. In case we don't have a good relationship with the employees, at that moment, all the people will run away from the factory. All the people scared of that. Yeah. So I think we should care about our employees heart by heart. Yeah. So they will feeling that, and in case our company or factory we are facing the emergency situation, and they will stand by side with us. Yeah. Not run away.
Yeah, I think that's a very important concept. I think I spent quite a few years in the U.S., and the U.S. is all about unions, right? And when you talk about unions, it's all about benefits to the employee and the negotiations and the contracts. Right? So very, very formal and rigid. And then you hear about factories in other countries where it's all about the bottom line, right? Reduce costs as much as possible so you can get a product as cheap as possible. But in Vietnam, the other thing you have to consider is actually the feelings of the employees. And this sounds very foreign as a business person. You kind of almost don't care about emotions, right? But it's actually very important in Vietnam. I think one statistic or one fun fact, it's not an official statistic, but most factory owners that I speak to, after the Lunar New Year, about half your employees will not come back. That's just the standard of operating in Vietnam. You would lose half your workforce. You have a factory of 1,000 employees, you now have to rehire 500 employees every year. Right, so what Ms. Kwan is saying is actually very important. You need to develop that employer-employee relationship so that the employees will continue their, I don't want to say loyalty, but it's more of like the emotional bond they have with the employer, and that's how you can continue to build and grow more quickly.
The engagement. Yeah.
And then our last topic would be the customer. Right, so how can foreign companies think about engaging the Vietnamese customer? The consumer. Right, so the last topic, so we went from regulatory to employees. The last one is the customer. Right, so how can, when a foreign company enters Vietnam, they have to think about how do they need to structure their product so that it appeals to the Vietnamese consumer.
You talk about the customers
Customer.
here, B2C or B2B?
B2C.
B2C, Actually, my business is B2B. So how can I answer your question?
Well, we talked about earlier about equality
Okay,
and
yeah.
price.
I recall the message I just read in the internet. According to the report from the Insider of Intelligence, in the Vietnam market, there are 63.8 million persons are using the smartphone. The calculation is 1.6% higher than last year. That means all the consumer here is very care about the high tech, and they are willing to pay whatever 1,000 or 2,000 per one smartphone, and they willing to get a new one. Then yeah, so I think the quality is very important because iPhone is I think it's the most good smartphone that more welcome in the worldwide. Quality is an issue, and the other thing is the service. The services must come must follow after the sales transaction. I would like to talk about a little bit about the B2B, like how we get our customer as a foreigner company, how we get the support from the local customers. We have, of course, we have to strengthen, standardize our quality, and then we have to set our sales service policies. It depends on the level of the customers, and then we have to some special. How will I say? We have to some special yearly program to the activities to serve to our the customers, and then I think the local market is very concerned about the quality and the sales service at the same time.
Thank you. I think the key message here is just because you're selling to the Vietnamese market does not mean you should sell, your strategy should be the low price leader. Because there are many people in Vietnam that are buying the iPhone full price. They are looking for high tech, they're looking for high customer service. And so that's something to consider when you start thinking about your business in Vietnam. Okay, so I think that's our last speaker. I think we may have time for maybe one question. If anybody in the audience has a burning question for any of our panelists, we can take a question. Any factories looking to enter Vietnam? Okay, well, I think that the panelists will also be around later if you want to talk to them during the break. So I'm going to wrap up here. I think the key theme that we look at here is there's a lot of knowledge in China, and there's a lot of potential in Vietnam. And the two countries are very active in working with each other. I think the common theme I'm seeing is that we're both very open to sharing and working together. And I think across all the panelists, when I spoke to them separately, everybody said, look, we're all in Asia, let's work together. And let's bring to the world a high quality Asian product. And I think that's a really great way to look about it, and it's a great way to really go into this conference thinking about how you can meet other people here and how we can all cooperate together. This is not a competition. I think this is more of how can we work together to grow together. And I'm very excited to hear the panels for the rest of today and tomorrow. Thank you very much for being here today.